Hey guys, welcome back. This is International Master Asaf Givon here, and I wanted to present to you some more opening ideas, since I've seen that the previous the audience liked my other videos about opening. So at this point, I'm going to be presenting for you a weapon that I occasionally implement in some quick time control games, especially Blitz and Rapid with the white pieces. This is the so-called Vienna system. This goes after e4, e5. Actually, there are a couple of openings in chess that are being called the Vienna opening, but this one is after the move e4, e5, not to be mistaken with some other opening lines called the Vienna system. And here, instead of the common knight f3 or bishop c4, we're going to be dealing with the move knight c3. So white is basically going for a setup here, which is a little bit similar to the King's Indian opening as black, or if you are playing as white, the closed Sicilian. This is also something that is extremely similar to that. So it goes knight c3, g3, bishop g2, knight e2, and castling, with the idea to eventually go with the pawn push f4. This is a line that is not very frequently being played in tournaments, so if you play this kind of system, you are very likely to surprise your opponents with some fresh ideas. So in this video, I'm going to be dealing with the two most popular responses that black has in this position. It's not to say that these are the only moves that you can choose from, but these are, to my eyes, the most logical and also the most frequently played in practice. So this first option we're going to be dealing with is when black plays knight f6 and then proceeds with normal development, so bishop c5, knight c6, castling, d6, and etc. This is what lots of people are likely to do when facing this type of system. And the second option for black, which I think is also very important, is what if he goes straight away with d5, basically taking advantage or trying to take advantage of the fact that we didn't really try to fight for the center of the board, to try to seize it first. So we will see what happens there. So let's start. First of all, let's go with the move bishop c5, which in my opinion is what most of you will face most frequently. Black is basically following a similar pattern to openings such as the Italian game, and this is a very kind of normal move that you expect to play, expect to face. White goes bishop g2. Please take note that black can no longer play the pawn push d5 no more. So if black wants to make this kind of a pawn break, he must do this in an earlier stage. Now it's no longer possible. So black plays knight c6. And now please pay attention to the following setup. Knight goes to e2, not an f3, because our plan later on is, after some preparation, to be able to push our pawn to f4 and to create some attack on the king side. This is why white should definitely not position his knight on f3, for example, like he used to do. Black normally castles, white castles as well. And here black has two choices. Lots of people in this position would definitely automatically play the move d6. Looks like a very normal looking move. What can be wrong with it? And actually there's not too much wrong with this move, but actually in this case white can take advantage of the fact that the black bishop cannot retreat back home to play this move knight to a4. And this is very annoying for black, because now he basically has to give up his two bishops advantage. He cannot really avoid that. If the bishop tries to retreat to b4, for example, white can just chase away this bishop all the way back to b6, and eventually he will capture this bishop, so it doesn't really matter too much. So, one second. So this is why the move d6 is considered to be kind of inaccurate in practice. This is why most people prefer to play. Sorry. This is why most people choose to play in the after-mentioned position the move a6. The idea is to prepare the retreating square on a7 for the bishop, and only then play the move d6. But now I want you to pay very close attention, because now white is going to play a little bit of a move order trick on black, with the idea to go f4 very, very fast. So instead of going with the normal move like d3, white immediately goes with the move h3. His plan is to move his king to h2, and then very quickly go with the move f4. And it's very, very important that we play this move at once, because I will show you later on what happens if we try to delay the move h3. Now black plays d6 normally, and white plays king h2. Obviously he cannot play f4 before he moved the king away. Let's say black plays bishop e6, his normal developing move, and now white is just in time to play the move f4 before black managed to counter break in the center with the move d5. This is very important. In this position actually there is also a nice trap. If black now takes on f4, first of all, if white wants, he can just take with the knight on f4 and have a very nice game, because he opened up his f file, and he can later on continue his attack on the king side. But perhaps even more kind of enterprising is the move d4, kind of a little bit of a surprise move, because now black is essentially losing a piece. The best he can do is grab some pawns, take on g3 for example. Now white must take back with the king on g3, because the knight has to stay and defend the pawn on d4. Please pay attention to the fact that even though the white king might look exposed on g3, black has actually no direct ways to attack him. If black plays knight h5 check, white can simply retreat his king to h2, and there is no way to continue black's assault, so white doesn't need to worry too much about that. And of course, if the bishop moves, there is always this fork with d5, which is like the key idea here. What else? So if black does not take the pawn on f4, his position just will be very unpleasant, because white will slowly start attacking his king with the move f5, potentially g4 later on, and our idea is to go with the kingside pawn storm with f5, g4, at some point g5, and basically try to checkmate the black king on the king side. Once again, a little bit similarly to what people do in the King's Indian. So if you play the King's Indian opening as black, this opening line as white is kind of especially appealing to you, because it has really very similar ideas. And now, why the move h3 is very important right now, as I've mentioned, because if white starts with the move d3 and only then goes h3, then if we compare this to what we've just seen, here black is just in time to counterattack in the center with the move d5, which means that white will no longer be able to play f4 so easily, because now white can actually black has lots of options to kind of counter break our center of the board, so it's no longer that effective. So this is a very important detail, to start with the move h3 in order to be the one to play f4 first before black breaks with d5. This is our core idea of this whole system. Let's see what happens if black kind of seizes his chance to make a counter break immediately with the move d5. Once again, as I've mentioned, if black wants to play the move d5, he should do this right now, because later on this option might not be available. d5. Now white must take on d5. Knight takes d5 and bishop g2. So here, as you can see, the position is a little bit different than what we've seen earlier. In this position, the bishop on g2 is not being abstract by the white pawn on e4. So in these kind of positions, white's whole plan is a little bit changing. Now we will be trying mostly to pressure the queen side, thanks to this well-placed bishop on g2. The immediate threat is obviously to take the knight on d5. So first of all, black has to react to this. He has a couple of options. The best move by theory is the move knight takes c3. Some other moves has also been played, some knight retreats, such as knight b6, even knight f6 I've seen some good players play. But in general, those moves always, to me, look a little bit passive. For example, if black goes knight b6, my preferred idea in this position is to put immediate pressure on the pawn on e5. So I want to go knight f3. And after knight c6, the plan is to go castling and very quickly put a rook on e1 and kind of ask black how exactly does he want to defend the pawn on e5, since the move f6 would be a little bit weakening, and a move such as bishop d6 allowing white already to go d4, which we are very happy about doing, kind of taking opportunity to use our development advantage. If black takes on d4, he is already exposed to some immediate checks on the e-file, which are very unpleasant. So the best that black can do in this position is probably try to somehow passively defend the pawn on e5, which is a little bit unpleasant. And this is a main reason why most grandmasters prefer to take on c3 here. Another important move to consider is what happens if black plays the move bishop e6, because it looks like a very natural move, developing a piece into the game while defending the knight on d5. And even though it looks very logical, this move is actually considered to be inaccurate, because now white, a little bit similarly to what we have seen earlier, can put immediate pressure on the pawn on e5. So you can go knight f3, knight c6 castling. The idea stays the same, to go rook e1 and build up the pressure on the pawn on e5. And also similarly to the previous position, black doesn't have too much of good ways to deal with this problem. For example, if black plays bishop c5, it already allows white to execute this typical tactic with knight takes c5, followed by the fork d4. And I think in this position black is having lots of troubles because all of his pieces are hanging in the center and he didn't manage to castle just yet. So for example, if black plays knight takes c3 and bishop d6, we can just regain our piece. And this position that you see in front of you might have been kind of okay for black if he would have managed to castle earlier on. But since it didn't do so, we have a lot of good options here. The simple move bishop takes b7, picking up a pawn, is very good, followed by check on c6. Also the move bishop a3 I think is very good, cutting off black from ever castling, at least not in the coming moves. Also the move queen h5, putting some pressure against black's position, is very good. So white is really for choice here, almost any move is good. So coming back a few moves earlier, this position is already kind of dubious for black. If black does not play bishop c5, but a move like bishop e7, then we can already play rook e1. And if black plays f6 to defend the pawn on e5, then you see his bishop on e6 starts to hang a little bit, and we take advantage of that by playing d4. Seizing the opportunity to attack the pawn on e5 once again, using the fact that he cannot take on d4, because then the bishop on e6 will hang. So once again, going a couple of moves back. Yeah, one last thing that I wanted to consider in this position, if black tries to take on c3, yeah, this is an important note. We take back with the b pawn. Always remember that in those positions, whenever black takes on c3, we always recapture with b takes c3. This gives us two benefits. One of them is the extra control over the center of the board, which makes the move d4 easier to achieve. But the second thing, which I find important, is the opportunity to put our rook on the b file, and with some pressure on the b7 pawn, which doesn't really want to move, since it immediately makes the bishop on g2 very happy. But black does have one very concrete approach here, which is to go e4 in this position. And now I want you to take a look at this position, because white is going to make a very dynamic move here. So this is knight d4, sacrificing a pawn. Knight takes d4, queen takes d4, attacking our rook on b1 or on a1, and now we can just go rook b1. In this position, white is temporarily a pawn down, but he has lots of compensation. The immediate threat is obviously to take on b7, but some more ideas are coming. For example, to play the move bishop b2, putting the bishop on the long diagonal, attacking the black queen. And black is actually, I think, having some problems in this position, so I would not recommend that for black. Let us move to the main line. After considering all of black's important sidelines, in this position, as I've mentioned earlier, black's most popular choice is knight takes c3, bishop takes, pawn takes c3, and now black can choose how to set up his pieces. The typical response would be knight c6, followed by the development of the bishop on f8. And here, once again, I want you to remember that in those type of positions, it's possible to go knight e2, but since you're ready to on c3, I want to go back to the plan of putting pressure on e5 by playing the move knight f3. Our plan, once again, is to castle and go very quickly with rook e1. Please pay attention to the fact that black does not actually has the option of going e4 like we've seen earlier, because now white simply plays queen e2, pinning that pawn, and black is actually facing quite major problems defending this pawn, because the pawn will be now pinned forever, and we can just continuously putting pressure against this pawn. Usually black goes bishop c5 or bishop d6, castles, castles, and rook e1. Once again, this is a reoccurring theme in our opening system. With a simple threat of taking on e5, we kind of force black to make up his mind about how he's going to defend his pawn. And you see that every move that black is doing here that aims to defend the pawn on e5 has some small drawbacks. For example, if he goes rook e8, which is one of the most frequently played moves in this position actually, here white can just go d4 using this tactical opportunity, because now after e takes d4, white takes on e8, queen takes e8, c takes d4, and I was kind of surprised that this position was actually played quite a lot of time in practice. I've seen maybe 20 games being played from this position by grandmasters, because I consider this position to be just very good for white. He managed to seize the center of the board. For example, after bishop e6, he can also play the move c4 with some ideas to go d5 or c5 or both, and white is just standing better here, so this is not recommended for black either. I do think that black can get a decent game either by playing the move queen f6 or by playing the move bishop g4. If black goes bishop g4, this is actually a pawn sacrifice, since white can go now h3. Once again asking the bishop the question of what exactly does he want to do. Bishop h5, g4, bishop g6. And now if white wants, he can accept black's challenge and take the pawn on e5. There is actually a nice trap in this position which I want to show you. Knight takes e5, rook takes e5, and in this position it seems like black has this tactical idea with bishop takes f2. This move sometimes works. The idea is to go queen f6 check on the next move, but in this position it's not really working, since after king takes f2, queen f6 check, white has this surprising resource with rook f5. And now he's actually getting two pieces for the rook. Bishop takes f5, g takes f5, queen takes f5, queen f3. It looks like the white king is a little bit exposed, but in reality black has almost no pieces that can attack him at the moment, so actually black is doing pretty poorly here. White is having the advantage of the two bishops here, which are about to become very strong. This bishop might go to a3, the rook might go on b1 to pick up some pawns on the queen side. And if black is greedy and he wants to take another pawn on c2, then we have the opportunity to exchange queens with the move queen e4. And black is actually having lots of troubles. White is much better here. This position was already played in some high level game. So you see even grandmasters and good players fell for this trap. So probably if black wants to go to this position, he should just sacrifice the pawn. For example, go bishop d6, followed by some kingside attack with f5. And this position is interesting. The objective evaluation of this position to me is just unclear. White is having a pawn up, black is having some initiative to compensate it. And my suggestion for you is just to analyze this position a little bit with your computer if you want to make sure white is not in serious troubles. I didn't see any direct ways for black to win, so white is fairly safe. If you want to be extra safe, of course you are not forced to actually accept the pawn sacrifice. You can go with a move such as d3, with the idea to go knight d2 and knight c4, which is also a pretty frequently occurring maneuver in those type of positions. This is all I have to say about the move bishop g4. Queen f6 is also arguably the main move in this position and a very frequently played move in grandmaster practice. Just wants to defend the pawn on e5. Now we can basically no longer go with the plan of d4 because black has too much control there. So my suggestion for you is just to go with the move d3 and simply develop your pieces with the simple scheme of bishop e3. And one of white's ideas actually stays the same, is just to put pressure on the pawn on e5. For example, let's say black makes a waiting move such as h6, which is always a useful move in this kind of positions. White goes bishop e3, and if black just exchanges, white can once again build up some pressure against the pawn on e5 using moves like queen e2. The other rook comes to e1, and eventually black will have to make up his mind how exactly is he going to defend the pawn on e5. Either he will slightly weaken his position, or he will be forced to sacrifice it in not ideal circumstances. So this is everything I have to say about the Vienna opening for white. I think anybody who wants to play this opening watching this video should definitely investigate this opening slightly more than what is presented in this video. In this kind of short, this is like a short summary of this opening. I do suggest you to invest this opening slightly more, go see some games of good players with this line as white, maybe analyze this position just a little bit with the engine and see how it works for you, and then, you know, go practice it a little bit in some quick time control games. So, hope you enjoyed it. See you guys in the next videos. Bye bye.